guys, we're back for part 2 of our Revolution Watch Bar video on every known complication in watchmaking. I'm joined, of course, by my co-pilot, Constant Kwong.
What's up, guys?
What's up? And it is an absolute pleasure to be here with you. Okay, let's get into it right now. We talked about a perpetual calendar briefly, and we're going to get to that. But before we get there, we have to talk about one other watch, which is kind of similar to the GMT watch, but kind of not. And that is the Worldtimer watch. And this is my personal 5131 Patek Philippe Cloisonné enamel Worldtimer.
Amazing watch.
Right, so this system was created by Louis Cotier, very famous dude in watchmaking, and was popularized by Patek Philippe. He also did the travel time as well, but the cool thing about this was he figured out a way to display all of the world's 24-hour zones. So the way he did that was he created a watch with central hands and then attached to a 24-hour disc indicator. Then on the perimeter of the dial, you have the 24 different cities, each of which represents a different time zone. By synchronizing the display of the 24 cities, plus the 24-hour time ring, you're able to tell time simultaneously in all the different time zones.
That's why I call it a world timer, because I can just see the world, literally.
However, until Philip Stern invented this watch, right, you actually had to manually change each of the different displays, right? So you would have to manually correct the city disc, using, say, a second crown in, like, for example, our favorite Patek Philippe Worldtimer, and possibly the most beautiful watch ever made, which
the
is
reference 2523.
Or you could even be attached to the bezel that rotated as well, and you would just manually operate it that way. But the cool thing about the 5131 is that by pressing just this button here, you simultaneously cause both the 24-hour ring and the city disc to jump, which I think is really cool. One thing we need to talk about related to Worldtime watches is that the majority of them don't have a correction for daylight savings time.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You're right. Yeah.
So, like, kind of 6 months out of the year, it doesn't actually tell time so accurately.
So accurate,
But look at it. It's so beautiful. And look at this particular watch. It's got cloisonné enamel in the center, and it's absolutely stunning. Now, if that really does bother you, just as a little hint, right? In 2007, Jean Lecoutre created a Worldtime watch that just has a little mark that tells you to read just 1 hour offset during daylight savings time, which actually maybe is a bit cluttered looking, but really smart, because from a functional perspective, it allows you to tell time when it's daylight savings time.
But that's really anybody cares
No one cares. But no one really cares, because if you've got a Worldtimer on your wrist, it's just basically a work of art. So now we're going to go into the Perpetual Calendar, right?
Yes.
Now, you have to understand from the perspective of, like, civil time and solar time, there's a bit of a difference. The Gregorian calendar, which was created by Pope Gregory, right, has divided the year into 365 days. But the actual solar year is slightly longer. So what does this mean? That every year you develop a bit of an overage, right? And so every 4 years, we insert another day into February to compensate for this overage, right? And that is February
29, which is the leap year, we call it.
Exactly. But there's an additional problem to that, because this also creates a bit of an overage. And so every 100 years, even though it falls on a 4-year cycle, you omit the leap year. And watches that can do this, I'll call a secular perpetual calendar. But let's not get into that for the time being. Let's just talk about perpetual calendars, right? So to me, perpetual calendars are so cool. They're like if you had a friend that was a genius, right? And he could tell you, like, really good, he'd provide like flawless information all the time, because it automatically compensates for the shifting rhythms between the 30 and 31 days. And even knows when February has 28 days and 29 days. It's a brilliant, brilliant watch. Probably my favorite in terms of perpetual calendars is my personal Royal Oak perpetual calendar, here executed in blue ceramic. This is really cool because previous to this watch, I would think that perpetual calendars pretty much belong in mostly classic watches, right? Beginning with the legendary Patek Philippe.
1526.
Yeah, the same year in 1941, Patek Philippe launched the first serially produced perpetual calendar, the 1526, and also the first serially produced perpetual calendar chronograph, the
1518.
The 1518. And now I just want you to understand this. This is in 1941. This is in the middle of the Second World War. And Patek Philippe understands that when times are uncertain, the best way to combat that is by creating watches that are so dope it inspires humanity. At least that's my perspective. So when I think of a perpetual calendar, I normally think of it in that kind of watch, a really classic watch. But AP was also an innovator in terms of perpetual calendars. And it created the world's thinnest automatic perpetual calendar in the end of the 70s, which you have to understand was when the Swiss watch industry was amid the quartz crisis, right? So in the middle of a time when the culture of mechanical watches is being deracinated, Audemars Piguet is like, you know what? We're going to show you the beauty of mechanical watches, and it drops to the 5548.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
The world's soonest automatic perpetual calendar at the time, and absolutely mind-blowing in terms of technology. So then in the 80s, it takes that movement and it puts it inside the venerable Royal Oak.
That's right,
And
yeah.
it creates, to me, one of the most sublime watches of all time. That watch has been in production since the mid-80s. And actually in the last decade, I would say is the watch that brought the perpetual calendar complication
That's right.
to the next
Yeah.
generation.
Because I think Audemars Piguet is the one that brought this, like what you said, the classical complication, wed it beautifully with a sports case. There's no other watches that did it as well as the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak.
Yes.
And I think, and I know that's the reason why it's so super popular, it's still popular today.
Right.
You know?
So we mentioned Patek Philippe created the 1518 back in 1941, and that was the world's first perpetual calendar chronograph that was serially produced. But this is the 5970 Perpetual Calendar Chronograph.
Yes.
So what is this watch? Well, as I said, it is a perpetual calendar. So it tells the shifting rhythms of the 30 and 31 days. It also knows when to add an additional day in February and gives you an indication of the 4-year leap year cycle. But on top of that, it has a chronograph function, which was designed by Thierry Stern. This was kind of like his graduation design like project. This was the watch that convinced his dad that he was now able and capable of taking over Patek Philippe. I think he's done an exemplary job over the last couple of decades. But to me, from the perspective of proportion, elegance, everything, this watch is absolutely masterful.
I agree. I mean, it's one of my favorite modern Patek Philippe's in terms of Grand Com. But the thing is, I also think one of the reasons why people really love this watch because it ties so close to the lineage of the case design of the 2499 as well.
Not only the case design, but I will say even the dial design of the 2499 and of the 1518. So the thing about the 1518 is that it had square pushers and a tachymeter.
That's right, yeah.
Which were considered to be like some of the most desirable traits for a Patek chronograph. And then the first series of the 2499 also has square pushers and a tachymeter as well. By series 2, you go to a tachymeter and round pushers as well.
That's right, yeah.
And then you had the 3970, which had no tachymeter and had round pushers. And then in the 5970, Thierry Stern showing his deep understanding of Patek Philippe culture, and second of all, showing his design ingenuity, brought the tachymeter and square pushers back, and also created these beautiful flared lugs for the case as well, creating, as we discussed, to me, probably the most beautiful perpetual calendar chronograph ever created of all time in watch history. So let's talk about the tourbillon. This is probably the most misunderstood complication of all time in watchmaking, right? So I've heard so many different people explain it in so many different ways, all of which are totally wrong, right? So let's go on record now. What is a tourbillon? The tourbillon was patented in 1801 by
Abraham Louis Breguet.
probably the greatest watchmaker of all time until, of course, François-Paul Journe turned up, right? François-Paul, we love you, dude. And I'm gonna say that the tourbillon is a really intriguing complication. So the reason that he created it was, back in the day when you were using a pocket watch, you put it in your vest.
Yes.
And it was in the vertical position. And Breguet realized that when a watch is in the vertical position, right, gravity has a negative effect on the regulating organ. So what's happening is that the balance wheel and the hairspring are turned this way. So you have less concentric breathing of the hairspring. And in addition to that, you also have friction placed on different parts because, especially back in that day, tolerances were not enormous. So when it's in a vertical position all the time, you have an additional friction created by it being placed in that position. So what did Breguet do? He put all the regulating organs inside of a cage. So he put the balance spring, and the escape wheel inside of a cage, which rotated once on its own axis. His initial ones were not 1 minute, but today the most popular are 1 minute tourbillons. And in so doing, you average out the errors over that time period, in this case, over 1 minute, right? So does a tourbillon therefore have a place in a wristwatch? Constant, what do you think?
Technically, no, all right, in terms of wristwatches now are not in one position anymore. It is just a very different technical prospect from a pocket watch. Okay, so tourbillon is no.
Yeah, but I would also say that we're in a different era today as well, right? Because following the quartz crisis, where electronic timekeeping kind of took over the world, right? When watches came back in the 1980s, and especially with, again, Patek with the Calibre 89 and so on, or with Blancpain also by, revived by Jean-Claude Biber in the 80s, watchmaking became about emotional value. It became about trying to create beauty and emotion more than trying to be the best timekeepers in the world.
That's right.
I guess the equivalent I would make is that, like, putting a tourbillon in a wristwatch is like trying to build the most beautiful sailboat in the world. Now, is that sailboat going to be faster than the slowest powerboat in the world? No. But which one do you want to be on? I'd rather be on the most beautiful sailboat, right?
Yes, I think that's one thing that a lot of people, a lot of these reviews, they talk about watches in terms of specification, this and that. But end of the day, right, watches are bound to human emotions.
Yes.
The reason why a tourbillon is still here, even though obviously there's not much use of chronometry, doesn't help in terms of a wristwatch in a tourbillon.
Well, okay. You bring up an interesting point because this is something and it's fun that we're debating this as well, right? But there was a watchmaking competition in Switzerland called the Concours International de la Chronométrie, right? Which basically was a competition that invited watches from every field of watchmaking in Switzerland to participate, and they were actually going to find the most accurate watch.
Okay.
They only held it 2 years in a row because after the second year, like everyone was like, dude, this is too stressful,
okay,
right? But in both years, it was a tourbillon that won.
Okay.
Right? The first year was a Jägermeister tourbillon, and then the second year it was a Grubel Force, which incidentally is one of our favorite tourbillon manufacturers.
That's right.
But let's talk about the tourbillon and its application to a wristwatch. So I agree with you, a traditional tourbillon, is more of a work of art.
Yes.
Rather than, let's say, a device to enhance accuracy.
Yeah.
However, there are certain brands that I think have made a real effort. So one I want to talk about is Chopard LUC.
Yes,
why? Because they cost certify all of their tourbillons as chronometers, which I think is amazing.
You know how insane is that to cost certify a tourbillon?
That's phenomenal, right? And actually, the only other brand that was doing that besides them for the longest time was Patek with their 10 days tourbillon. But I don't think they manufacture that watch anymore. So now it's only Chopard LUC and Ferdinand Berthoud, but they're basically kind of the same brand, or led by the same individual. And that is something that I truly admire. Now, I wanted to show you this watch, which is my personal Debethune DB28, because this is another watch that addresses what a tourbillon should be in the context of a wristwatch. So what does it do here? Well, first of all, Denis Flageolet, who is the guy behind this brand, said, I want the cage to be as light as possible, right? Because I don't want it to be a parasitical device as torque diminishes from the mainspring, right? So he made the cage only 0.18 grams, which is the lightest tourbillon cage around. Then, because he wanted to have a watch that was shock resistant, he made it fast beater, so it's 5 hertz. Right? And then on top of that, the rotation of the tourbillon cage is 30 seconds. And I find that these three innovations create a watch that has great application for a wristwatch tourbillon and has always told time pretty accurately every time I've worn it as
Interesting.
well. So let's go from a tourbillon to the minute repeater. So Constant, what is a minute repeater?
So minute repeater, basically it is a watch that has the ability to tell time using sound.
Wow.
Yes.
Incredible.
Right.
So from what I understand, this was created back in the day of like aristocratic noblemen, and they wanted to tell time in the dark, right? And they didn't want to like light a candle because that would be too banal and gauche. So somehow they had to create watches that could strike out the time.
Yes.
But a minute repeater strikes out time in the following way. It strikes
before I want to clarify with you something. I heard that the origin of the minute repeater story comes from this Vallée des Jeux, and then while in long winters when all of the farmers transition into watchmakers doing watch parts back in the late 1700s or something, and then they have this town clock. Because it's winter and it's dark and there's no light, the town clock actually chimes the time, and that is it the original story on how the minute repeater came about?
I would say, from my perspective, perhaps not.
Okay.
Because I think that the town clock chiming would probably be something that was used in every village in Europe at some point. You know what I mean? Not just the Vallée des Jeux. I also feel as if the invention of the minute repeater may have precluded the max exodus of the Huguenots to Switzerland to settle in the Vallée des Jeux.
I got no idea what you're talking about.
Oh, okay. But it's a cool story.
Yeah, it's a cool story.
It's a cool story. So you could choose either one. You could be inspired by a town clock. The story I've heard is that basically, like if you're a nobleman sitting in the dark, you couldn't be bothered to go look for a match to, I don't even know if they had matches back then, to rub two sticks together. Just joking. to light a match, to light a candle, and then take out your pocket watch. You just want to press a slide and then hear it strike out.
Okay.
But a minute repeater tells time in a very specific way, right?
That's right.
So it has two gongs, and it strikes a lower sounding gong for the hour.
Yes.
Right? Then it strikes a combination of the lower and higher sounding gong for the quarters, right? And then it strikes out the remaining minutes within that quarter, right? With the higher sounding gong,
that's right.
right? And Constant, maybe you've got a watch right there. Tell us a little bit about that.
So this is a minute repeater tourbillon from H. Moser NC. Beautiful green fumidao as well, with of course Daguerre diamonds.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
With the permission of our friends from Sincere Watch, I'm going to set the time and play the repeater. Is that okay?
Is it okay? Yeah.
So we're going to set it to 11:59, And then guys, when you're using a minute repeater, set the time only in the clockwise
Yes,
direction,
that's right.
please.
Never ever go back, always go forward, clockwise direction.
Okay, and then I'm gonna press the slide now.
So this is the slide that amazing. So that's how you normally read a minute repeater. But of course, there are other variants of minute repeater as well. But this is the most, I would say, the most noticeable one. So hours, and then quarters, and then the minutes.
Yeah, there's also a decimal minute repeater.
There is.
So instead of quarters, it strikes the tenths of the minute as well.
Yeah.
So Patek makes one with the Grandmaster chime. Kari Voutilainen makes one as well. But I would say the 2 strikes for the quarters is the kind of classic minute repeater.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So if you rolled up to a party of watch nerds wearing this, you would be kind of the man. Unless you met the guy that was wearing that. So Constant, what is that?
So we have a Global Force Grande Petite Sonnerie Tourbillon here. You know, we are grateful our friends in Sincere to borrow this watch for us to do this video.
That's incredible.
Yes, and wait, tell people why this is a one-up of a minute repeater.
Well, I mean, first of all, this watch, I have to say, like most Grande Sonneries, and there's not a lot of them, they're pretty classic, very heavy, and quite hard to wear. And I think that's the extraordinary thing about this Global Force is it's like so light, and the case is so ergonomic. It's absolutely spectacular. Okay, so a Grande Sonnerie or Grande et Petite Sonnerie differs from a minute repeater in the following. It can tell time in passing. When you set it to the Grande Sonnerie mode, it will strike out the number of hours on the hour, and then the full count of the hours and the quarters on each quarter as well.
That's right.
This particular watch also is so powerful sounding. The fact that it was on the table and we could hear it from here was
It's loud,
incredible.
man. Yeah, you don't normally get that from the repeaters.
Right, so that's Grande Sonnerie mode. You can also set it to Petite Sonnerie mode as well. And as our dear friend So Sincere Watch were explaining to us, as we don't actually own Grande Sonneries, perhaps she does, I don't know. But in Petite mode, it strikes the hour on the hour and just the quarters on the quarter.
Yes, that's right.
But in addition to that, there's a third function for a Grande and Petite Sonnerie, and that is a minute repeater function as well.
Right, yes.
So you can also tell time on demand, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And the idea of creating a system that can automatically tell time in passing this way is considered to be the greatest achievement in watchmaking.
Yes, this is the highest tier, I would say, in terms of other than automation. It also does have the most technical complication that ever is for watchmaking. It is the Grande Petite Sonnerie.
Yeah, and then just, Grubel being Grubel, just to like make it a little bit more fun, they threw down an inclined tourbillon as well, which is incidentally their way of addressing.
You see? So it's another 50 minutes, so.
Oh, wait a second, I just realized something. Like the Grubel Grande Sonnerie doesn't sound like just the quarters and the quarters. It sounds it out 1 minute before, so you have the maximum length.
Oh my God.
You know what I'm saying? So it doesn't sound out the quarters and the quarters. Did you just hear that?
Yeah.
Because it was like ding dong, ding dong. Then it sounded out 1 quarter, and then it sounded out a whole bunch of strikes.
Yes.
Right? I think it sounds it out the minute before the quarter, so you have the maximum number of chimes. That's
okay,
crazy.
this is uncommon. This is only Grubel only has this.
And of course, it's because we clearly don't own Grubel Forces.
Yes.
Michelle Leidecker, however, you like to just got married, bro. So wedding gift, if you're thinking about that, I would be very happy.
Hey, don't forget about me, Michelle. Come
No,
on.
but did you just hear that?
Yeah,
That was really
it was
interesting.
a bit different. Yes.
Yeah, because normally a Grande Sonnerie it would be like say it's 11, so string out 11 times, and then if it was 30 minutes, it would be ding dong, ding dong,
yes,
right?
and then
but it didn't. It struck 11, then it did ding dong, then it went ding 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 ding, right? I think it's been the Grubel Force's particularity, because they want it to be the most animated possible, is that just before the 30 minutes mark, it strikes out the quarter plus 14 additional strikes,
basically,
right? Which is cool.
It's really
Okay,
cool.
well now we're gonna have to wait for 15 minutes to hear it again. But so let's keep talking for 15 minutes. And then we walked off and went in that ice cream. We came back and no one touched it.
Yeah.
Yes!
Oh, yes, wow,
yes!
amazing. Okay,
So,
okay.
this watch doesn't strike out just the quarters in passing. The incredible thing is it strikes 1 minute before each quarter.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it strikes out the quarter before, and then it strikes out the full 14 minutes
Wow,
on top
insane.
of that. So you have the greatest kind of like auditory experience. Okay, that's it. This is the conclusion of our video because you can go no higher than this watch.
Yes.
This is probably the greatest Grande Sonnerie and potentially the greatest watch ever created in humanity. Constant, thank you so much for joining me, guys. Of course, we're going to shoot all these B-rolls for you. It is truly extraordinary.
Amazing, man.
And the fact that they would think of doing that just to create an even greater experience for the user is just
Dude,
mind-blowing.
I got no idea at all.
Well, I'm not speechless because I'm clearly talking, but I'm just so blown away by this.
Wow,
In addition to that, beautiful design. Okay, all the other thing about Grande before I say probably the greatest finishing on the planet as well, right?
man.
And so
Yeah.
you have probably the greatest watch that's come to the Revolution watch bar so
Sick.
far. So guys, if you enjoy our content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. Thank you for hanging out with us, and that's our breakdown of all the major complications.
Nice. Thanks for joining us, man. Thanks, Wei.
Peace.